The brand new child's backpack was sitting in my wife's back seat. Rebecca had asked me to grab a reusable grocery bag from her car. The bag was under a small rust orange backpack, the kind made for an 8-year-old. We hadn't bought school supplies in decades, and our two grandkids were teenagers living 3 states away. I moved it and noticed a white cloth label sewn inside. Hollis. Our last name. Nothing else. No first name. No child initials. Who's the backpack for? I asked when I came inside. Rebecca was putting groceries away. School supply drive. With our name in it? She glanced over. They wanted donors to label what they brought in. Helps keep things organized. That sounded reasonable. I opened the refrigerator for the milk. Since when you do school supply drives? Community center's helping with one. Rebecca had volunteered there since retiring. Food collections, tutoring, sign-ups, weekend events. If somebody needed another pair of hands, she usually volunteered hers. I went back outside for the remaining groceries. When I lifted the backpack again, I noticed a short plastic tether sewn into an inside pocket. A little clip hung from the end. Empty. I brought the backpack inside. Rebecca set it near the pantry. Anything supposed to go on this? I held up the clip. I don't know. Probably part of the bag. I zipped it closed. By dinner, I'd mostly forgotten about it. 3 days later, Rebecca asked me to carry 2 boxes from our garage into her car. One box was open. Inside were 3 more rust orange backpacks. Same size, same model. I picked up the top one. Inside was another white cloth label. Hollis. I checked the second. Hollis. Then the third. That evening I waited until we were cleaning up after dinner. I thought donors were labeling their own backpacks. They are. All 4 say Hollis. Rebecca stopped wiping the counter. That's how this batch is being tracked. By our name? The school wanted it that way. Which school? She folded the dish towel once. It's through the district. It wasn't a ridiculous answer, but it wasn't really an answer either. And for the first time, the backpack in her car didn't look like a donation. It looked like something Rebecca had expected me not to examine too closely. I'm Dennis Hollis. I'm 66. Rebecca is 62. We've been married 34 years and live in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I retired from a regional grocery distribution company. For 18 years, I supervised warehouse shifts, and before that, I handled inventory and scheduling. Rebecca spent most of her career managing a dental office. At work, I liked rules that didn't require interpretation. If weekend overtime rotated, everybody rotated. If somebody got Christmas Eve off this year, somebody else got it next year. I wasn't trying to make people miserable. I thought consistency kept people from wondering who mattered more. That habit followed me home. A few years ago, our son asked to borrow $800 for a transmission. I barely agreed before I said, then we should offer your sister the same amount. Rebecca looked at me. She doesn't need $800. That's not the point. Dennis, sometimes that is exactly the point. I remember being annoyed because she said it like we'd had that conversation before. We had. 2 days after I found a box of backpacks, I opened the coat closet looking for work gloves. There were 2 more rust orange backpacks on the floor. Both said Hollis. 6 backpacks. 1 family name. I checked the plastic tethers. Still empty. That bothered me more than it should have. If our name was simply identifying the donor, why did every bag need the same sewn label? And why had Rebecca first called it donor labeling, then batch tracking? The next morning I called the district office. I didn't accuse anybody of anything. I asked whether they were running a school supply drive and whether donated backpacks needed the donor's name sewn inside. The receptionist sounded puzzled. The district isn't doing a general drive right now. Individual schools? Some schools have their own programs. Community organizations do too. So there isn't a district system for labeling batches? Not that I'm aware of. I thanked her and hung up. When Rebecca came home that afternoon, I didn't mention the call. She saw one of the backpacks on the kitchen chair. You were in the closet? Looking for gloves. She nodded. Then she picked up the backpack and carried it to the garage. Nothing in the movement was dramatic. That made it worse. The following Saturday, I had a legitimate reason to visit Westbrook Elementary. Our neighborhood association had loaned folding tables for a spring cleanup event, and I'd volunteered to return them after another board member hurt his shoulder. The custodian directed me to the multipurpose room. I carried in the first table. Then I stopped. Rust orange backpacks covered 3 long tables. Not 6. Closer to 20. Everyone looked exactly like the backpack from Rebecca's car, and every open bag showed the same white label. Hollis. A woman in her late 60s stood behind one table checking items against a clipboard. Rebecca was beside her. Neither had seen me. For a moment, I stayed where I was, holding one end of the folding table. The older woman opened a backpack and clipped something to the little plastic tether inside. It was a brass-colored metal token, about the size of a quarter but thicker, with a number stamped into it. She closed that bag and reached for another. Rebecca handed her another token. I set the table against the wall and walked closer. "Rebecca?" She turned. For half a second, neither of us spoke. Then the older woman smiled. "You must be Dennis." That didn't help. I looked at Rebecca. Apparently, she came around the table. I was going to explain when the woman quietly moved toward the far end of the room. I opened the nearest backpack. Hollis. A brass token was clipped inside. 31. The next backpack had 14. Another had 27. "What's this?" Rebecca said, "Dennis, let's talk." "I've been trying." I picked up another token. The shape was familiar, not from our house, not from anything recent. It had a shallow punch hole near the top and a stamped border around the edge. Cheap inventory hardware. I had handled hundreds of things like it once. Then I opened another backpack. The token inside was scratched along one edge. 08. I rubbed my thumb across it, and something old came back. A folding table in an employee break room. Cardboard boxes of school supplies. A January afternoon. A woman from receiving standing in my office doorway, arguing with me about a pair of winter gloves. I looked at Rebecca. "Where did you get these?" She didn't answer immediately. The older woman returned and held out her hand. "I'm Lorraine Pierce." I shook it automatically. "Those tokens came from an older program," she said. "How old?" Lorraine glanced at Rebecca. "Late 90s originally." I looked again at 08. "Why are they in these backpacks?" "They're used for internal kit tracking." "All right. Why is my name in every bag?" Rebecca said, "That's the part one needs to explain." I looked around the room. 20 small backpacks. 20 Hollis labels. 20 numbered tokens. 3 days earlier, my wife had told me donors were labeling their own bags. Then she'd told me the school was tracking our batch. The district had told me there was no such system. I set backpack 08 on the table. "Then explain it now." Lorraine pulled out a chair, but I stayed standing. She explained that the backpacks were first week kits. Several elementary schools in the area kept a small number ready for students who enrolled unexpectedly during the academic year. Families relocated for work. Parents changed apartments. A child might spend part of the year with a grandparent. Sometimes somebody simply moved across district lines at an inconvenient time. A student could arrive on a Wednesday when everybody else had started in August. Each backpack held the same basics: pencils, folders, notebooks, crayons, scissors, a lunch container. "So, it is a supply program," I said. "Yes," Lorraine said. I looked at Rebecca. "Then why tell me the district was tracking our batch?" She didn't answer. Lorraine opened one backpack and pointed at the cloth label. "These aren't identifying the children." I figured that much out. They identify which fund purchased kits. I looked down. "Hollis." "What fund?" "The Hollis New Student Fund." I actually laughed once. "There is no Hollis fund." Neither woman laughed. "How much money are we talking about?" Lorraine gave me a number that was almost disappointingly small. Enough for somewhere between 20 and 40 basic kits in a typical year, depending on donations and prices. No scholarship, no endowment, no building with our name on it. Just a little account buying school supplies. I turned to Rebecca. Did you put our name on this? No. Did you start it? No. Have you been putting our money into it? I gave $40 this year. 40. Same as other volunteers. Then who started a fund with my name? Rebecca held my eyes. You did. I never started a fund. I know. No, Rebecca. I never did this. She looked at token 08. Do you remember the warehouse school supply program? Of course. Do you remember that number? I picked up the token again. I remember something about it. Lorraine said, the fund didn't begin as a fund. I looked at her. What does that mean? Rebecca answered, it means nobody sat down and decided to create something called the Hollis New Student Fund. Then why does it exist? Because something you did kept getting carried forward. I looked at the 20 backpacks again. For a few minutes, I thought I'd caught Rebecca secretly attaching our family name to a charity. Instead, she was telling me the name had been there before she ever became involved. And according to her, I was the reason. 27 years earlier, I was a warehouse shift supervisor for the same grocery distributor I eventually retired from. Our company partnered with 2 nearby elementary schools on a small mid-year supply program. Employees could contribute a few dollars through payroll. Each participating department helped prepare standard kits for students arriving during the year. I liked the system. Same contribution, same list, same supplies. Nobody had to decide whose situation deserved an extra $10. The kits were tracked with numbered brass-colored inventory tokens left over from an old warehouse system. When a kit went out, somebody recorded the number. And now I remembered 08. A boy had transferred into one of the schools in January. His kit was standard, except somebody at the school asked if we could add winter gloves. The program rules didn't cover clothing. A woman named Cheryl, who worked in receiving, came into my office. There's enough left in this month's collection. I said, that's not what it's for. They're $6 gloves, Dennis. If we do it for one, we do it for everyone. Cheryl leaned against my door. Same isn't always the same thing as fair. I disliked that sentence immediately. It is if we're handling everybody else's money. I'm talking about gloves. And I'm talking about a program people agreed to contribute to. She stared at me for a second. Then she said, fine. For years, I remembered eventually changing my mind. That was the version I told Rebecca once or twice. Dennis followed the rule, thought about it, made an exception. At Westbrook, I said, I approve them later. Rebecca shook her head. No. Yes, I did. The child got gloves, she said. You remember that part. Then what's the difference? Cheryl bought them herself. I looked at Lorraine. She nodded. The memory shifted by one small piece. Cheryl coming back after lunch with a store bag, dropping a pair of dark blue gloves into the box beside token 08. I hadn't reimbursed her. I hadn't approved an exception. I'd simply said, okay, that's yours, not the program's. At the time, I considered that a clean solution. The rules stayed intact. The child got gloves. Everybody got what they needed. I picked up 08 again. So, how does that turn into this? Lorraine reached beneath her clipboard and pulled out copies of old account sheets. It doesn't, she said. Not by itself. She slid the first page toward me. The part that last had happened after the drive was over. The memory came back before Lorraine finished explaining it. Late afternoon, warehouse administrative office, fluorescent lights, a payroll clerk named Marlene sitting behind a metal desk with a calculator and a stack of contribution sheets. The school supply drive was finished. Marlene tapped a figure with her pencil. We got $43.18 left. Refunded. She looked at the employee list. That'll be less than $2 for most people. I remember leaning over the desk. Then, don't mail checks. Put it back through payroll. That'll cost more in processing than some of the refunds. A second clerk said, "Why don't we buy extra stuff for next year?" I shook my head. People approved standard student kits. I'm not deciding something different after we collected their money. Men lean aside. So, what do you want me to do with 4318? I looked at the school supply account. Leave it. Under what? She needed a contact reference because the drive itself was closing. I pointed at the blank line. Put Hollis there for now. Next arrival. She wrote it down. Hollis, next arrival. That's your official program name? She asked. No, it's so you know what the money belongs to. That was it. No meeting. No announcement. No intention beyond avoiding a pointless refund and not spending other people's contributions on something they hadn't approved. Back at Westbrook, Lorraine put her finger on the copied line. Hollis, next arrival. That was supposed to be temporary. I said. It was. She turned the page. The next year's sheet had another small balance added to the same line. Then another. Some years, almost nothing remained. Other years, employees deliberately added $5 or $10 because the rollover account already existed. I pointed at one entry. Who authorized that? Lorraine smiled slightly. You're doing it again. Rebecca almost smiled too, but stopped herself. Lorraine explained that when the company partnership eventually ended, the remaining balance transferred with the school program. A community group maintained it. Years later, the Education Foundation took over several small accounts and formalized them because informal bookkeeping had become impractical. The old reference name stayed. Hollis. The modern account wasn't large. Small community contributions, leftover balances, and occasional foundation matching kept it going. I looked around at the backpacks. Why are you involved? I asked Rebecca. Lorraine and I met through the community center. She mentioned an old school account with our name. I recognized the story. Lorraine said the foundation was updating the program. The old kits had become inconsistent, so they wanted standardized first-week backpacks. They asked if we wanted a family name removed. Rebecca said, and you said no. I said not yet. Why? Because you'd say, take it off before you understood what it was. You don't know that. Rebecca just looked at me. I looked away first. And when I found the backpack, I should have told you. You said donors were labeling them. Yes. Then you said the school was tracking the batch. I lied. Lorraine stepped away. Rebecca lowered her voice. I wanted you to see what the name was attached to first. That doesn't make the lie okay. I didn't tell her it was okay. I picked up token 08. What happened to him? Lorraine shook her head. We don't know. The kid with the gloves. I know. Those old records don't identify recipients. No later records? Not that connect to the token. I clipped 08 back onto the tether. That was all there was to know about him. Across the room, 20 rust orange backpacks sat open on the tables. Beside Lorraine's supplies was a stack of unused white cloth labels waiting to be sewn into the remaining bags. I asked, when do these go out? As schools need them, she said. Some could sit here for months. I nodded. Then I looked at the Hollis label inside the backpack in my hands. I didn't make a decision that afternoon. Rebecca and I went home with less conversation than usual. She didn't ask whether I was angry. I didn't tell her whether I was. 2 days later, Lorraine called. The labels can come out before distribution, she said. They're sewn in, but they're not permanent. I looked across the kitchen at Rebecca. She was reading something at the table. When she realized who was calling, she set it down. Take them out, I said. All of them. Yes. All right. Lorraine paused. And the fun name? What about it? That can change, too. I looked at Rebecca again. She didn't speak. Can the account keep operating without Hollis attached to it? Of course. Don't close it. I wasn't planning to unless you asked. Called the first week fund. Lorraine repeated it. First week fund. That's fine. Rebecca waited until I hung up, You sure? About the name? Yes. I don't want a kid walking into school carrying Hollis inside his backpack. She nodded once. I didn't say anything about her lie. Neither did she. The following Saturday, we went back to Westbrook. There were no children there, no ceremony, no announcement that Dennis Hollis had arrived to inspect the tiny program that had accidentally carried his name for decades. Just Lorraine, two volunteers, open cartons of supplies, and rows of rust-orange backpacks. A volunteer was removing labels at one end of the room. I watched for a minute. Then I sat at one of the preparation tables. Lorraine came over and handed me a small seam ripper. You don't have to do these yourself. I know. I took the first backpack. The white cloth label was stitched along 4 short sections. Hollis. I slipped the seam ripper beneath the first stitch. It snapped cleanly. Then the second. Across from me, Rebecca started on another bag. The room stayed mostly quiet except for cardboard sliding across tables and the occasional sound of the zipper. The third section came free. Then the fourth. I pulled the label away. One loose white thread remained caught in the seam. I pinched it between my fingers and drew it out. I opened the backpack wider. The little plastic tether was still there. Token 08 hung from it. Scratched edge. Stamped number. Nothing else. I looked at it for a moment. Then I closed the backpack. The zipper caught at the corner. I backed it up an inch. Pulled again. Zip.